Yeah, man, that's a great question. I had to become productive. It had to come out of sheer necessity because
Mhm.
I have a tendency to procrastinate. I am hands down the worst procrastinator that I know. Left to my own devices, literally, I will do nothing. I don't know if self-destructive is the right word, but I have an inner desire
Mhm.
to not work, to not engage in productive activities. And so I had to create a productivity system to override my default programming. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. What motivated you? I'm wondering, like, because a lot of times I've worked with youth, young professionals, students getting into university. They never even have that realization or motivation to create a system. So, what was your motivation to get to that point when you had that realization?
You know what? I'm actually gonna dig deep
Sure,
and
please.
bring up a story that I don't think I've ever talked about on a podcast. So I used to be in the Canadian Armed Forces,
Sure.
and I joined as soon as I could. I was just really eager to get away from my circumstance. I was running away in some ways from responsibility because
Fair
I
enough.
joined during the transition from high school to post secondary, and honestly, I didn't want to go to post secondary. Didn't
Hmm.
want to go to college. Didn't want to go to university. It just didn't make sense to me, which is ironic considering what my career would become years later.
Yeah,
And
I know,
I
right?
remember that I felt a lot of pressure, and I think the pressure was well intentioned to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Omar, I know that you can relate.
Of course.
South Asian parents, right? They
South
meant
Asian
they meant the
parents.
best for me, but I just didn't want to do it. And so I think going to the military was a personal development exercise masked as a professional one. And I joined, and within the first couple of months, we had this exercise that saw us as a fire team of five
Hmm.
dropped into a forest, and we had to get out of the forest. We had to use all the skills that we had developed during basic military qualification, or I think this was SQ, soldier qualification, and use it to literally get ourselves out of an adverse scenario. And man, my team fell apart. Like we started fighting and bickering and we did nothing. We were just we I think unbeknownst to us at the time, we all had similar personalities. We all had a tendency to do nothing. But when you are in an adverse scenario like that one,
Hmm.
when it starts getting dark, starts getting cold, when you start running out of food and water, and then when you start hearing the howls of wolves or who knows, Baba Yaga herself, that's when sort of you have to dig deep and summon this version of yourself. You have to default to your subconscious mind. You have to trust the leadership substructure that you have built thus far to navigate out of a scenario.
Hmm.
And so we had to get our shit together, excuse my language, and find a way to work together, to organize ourselves, and to make progress from point A towards point B. And we eventually got out, but that gave me a very vivid understanding that the things that allowed us to get
Hmm.
out of that scenario can be replicated. That
Yeah.
you, as a human being, can create constraints to unlock that fight, flight, or freeze response that prompts you into action. So, in order for me to get away from that version of myself that was slowly sliding into the worst version of myself, because again, had I not been productive, man, I think I would be broke.
Hmm.
I would be miserable. I would be resentful. I would be
Absolutely.
out of shape. I would not have the good things in my life that I have right now. I'm certain of that.
Yeah.
That if left to my own devices, I would devolve and become the worst version of myself. So, in order to develop the impetus, and then the motivation and sustained trajectory towards a better version of myself, I had to create a productivity system.